Imagine your ship being slowly crushed to death by ice, splintering apart beneath your feet thousands of miles from the nearest help, in one of the most hostile environments on the entire planet. Now imagine every single person on that expedition somehow making it home alive. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of Ernest Shackleton and the crew of the Endurance, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how 28 men survived nearly 2 years, stranded in the Antarctic without losing a single life. August 1914. A ship called the Endurance set sail from England, carrying Ernest Shackleton and a crew of 27 men on what's meant to be one of the most ambitious polar expeditions ever attempted. A complete crossing of the Antarctic continent on foot, coast to coast, through the South Pole. It's an era when polar exploration captures the public imagination the way space travel would decades later, and Shackleton, already a well-known figure from previous expeditions, is determined to achieve something no one else has managed before. The plan is bold from the very start. The Endurance will sail into the Weddell Sea, drop the shore party on the Antarctic coastline, and then Shackleton's team will begin an overland trek across the entire frozen continent while a separate support crew lays supply depots from the opposite side. It's an extraordinarily ambitious undertaking, and everyone involved understands the risks of sailing into one of the most unpredictable and dangerous stretches of ocean on Earth. The Weddell Sea itself has a fearsome reputation among polar sailors, known for its unpredictable currents and its tendency to trap ships in dense, shifting pack ice that can close in around a vessel with little warning. Shackleton and his crew are experienced enough to know the danger, but the reward of completing the first full crossing of Antarctica seems worth the risk. By January 1915, the Endurance is deep into the Weddell Sea, pushing through increasingly thick pack ice when disaster quietly begins. The ship becomes trapped, frozen solid into the surrounding ice, unable to move forward or backward. At first, this seems like a serious but survivable setback. Nobody yet realizes that the ship will never sail freely again. For months, the Endurance drifts helplessly with the ice, carried by ocean currents in directions completely outside anyone's control. The crew settles into an uneasy waiting game, maintaining the ship, tending to the sled dogs, and hoping that as the seasons shift, the ice will eventually loosen its grip and release them. Instead, the opposite happens. As the Antarctic winter deepens, the pressure of the surrounding ice only intensifies, slowly squeezing against the wooden hull from every direction. By October 1915, after nearly 9 months trapped in the ice, the pressure finally becomes too much. The ship's timbers begin to crack and groan under the strain, and Shackleton makes the grim decision to order the crew to abandon ship, moving their supplies out onto the surrounding ice floes. Over the following weeks, the crew watches in devastated silence as the Endurance is slowly torn apart, her hull crushed and splintered by the relentless ice, until she finally sinks completely beneath the frozen surface in November 1915. This is the moment where the expedition's original goal completely disappears, and an entirely different mission begins: pure survival. Shackleton and his men are now stranded on shifting sea ice, in the middle of the Antarctic, with no ship, no radio capable of reaching anyone, and absolutely no way for the outside world to know they're even in trouble. What follows is one of the most extraordinary displays of leadership and endurance in exploration history. Shackleton makes it his singular priority to keep every single man alive, and to keep morale from collapsing during what could easily become a slow, hopeless death sentence on the ice. The crew establishes camp directly on the drifting floes, salvaging what supplies and lifeboats they can from the wreck before it sinks, and begins a long, uncertain wait as the ice continues to carry them in unpredictable directions across the frozen sea. For months, the men live directly on the ice, in tents, enduring brutal cold, monotonous rations, and the constant uncertainty of not knowing whether the ice beneath them might crack open at any moment. They hunt seals and penguins to supplement their dwindling food supplies, and Shackleton works tirelessly to maintain discipline and a sense of shared purpose, understanding that despair, more than the cold itself, is what could ultimately kill his crew. By April 1916, the ice floes have drifted and begun breaking apart to the point where staying on them any longer becomes too dangerous. The crew loads into the 3 small lifeboats they'd managed to save from the Endurance and sets out across brutal, freezing open water, navigating between ice floes and through violent Southern Ocean swells until they finally reach the rocky, desolate shores of Elephant Island. It's the first solid ground any of them has stood on in nearly a year and a half, but it's also one of the most remote, uninhabited places on Earth, far outside any shipping route, offering no realistic hope of rescue on its own. Understanding that no one is coming to find them there, Shackleton makes a decision that many consider one of the boldest gambles in the entire history of exploration. He selects 5 men to join him on the most seaworthy of the 3 lifeboats, a 22-foot vessel named the James Caird, and sets out to sail roughly 800 nautical miles across some of the most violent ocean on the planet, aiming for a whaling station on South Georgia Island, the closest place with any realistic chance of finding help. The journey is almost impossible to describe without sounding exaggerated. For 17 days, Shackleton and his 5 companions battle towering waves, hurricane-force winds, and freezing spray that coats the boat in thick layers of ice, forcing the men to periodically chip it away just to keep the vessel from capsizing under its own weight. Navigation is done with nothing more than a sextant and brief, precious glimpses of the sun through the storm clouds, an almost unbelievable feat of precision sailing given the conditions. Remarkably, against all odds, the James Caird reaches South Georgia Island. But the ordeal is still far from over. The boat lands on the wrong side of the island, opposite from where the whaling station is located, separated by a mountain range that had never before been crossed on foot by anyone. With no other realistic option, Shackleton and 2 of his men, Frank Worsley and Tom Crean, set out on a grueling 36-hour trek across uncharted, glaciated mountains with no proper climbing equipment, driven by pure exhaustion and the knowledge that the lives of their entire remaining crew depend on them making it across. The crossing is brutal in ways that are difficult to overstate. The men have no tents, no sleeping bags suited for the terrain, and only a small carpenter's adze to cut steps into sheer ice slopes. At one point, faced with a steep descent and running out of daylight, they make the desperate decision to simply slide down a mountainside on a coiled rope, gambling that whatever lay at the bottom would be survivable rather than risk a slower, more exposed descent in the dark. They succeed. Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean stumble into the whaling station at Stromness, barely recognizable after months of extreme hardship, and immediately begin organizing a rescue effort, first for the 3 men left behind on the other side of South Georgia, and then for the far larger and more urgent task, getting back to Elephant Island to rescue the 22 men still stranded there. Rescuing the Elephant Island crew proves to be its own extended ordeal. Thick pack ice blocks several rescue attempts, forcing Shackleton to try again and again over the following months, refusing to give up despite repeated failures. Finally, in August 1916, more than 4 months after leaving them behind, Shackleton returns aboard a Chilean vessel and successfully reaches Elephant Island, finding every single one of his remaining men alive, having survived the entire winter under 2 overturned lifeboats, sustained mainly by seal meat and sheer determination. In total, every single member of the Endurance expedition, all 28 men, survives the ordeal and eventually makes it home, despite the ship itself being completely lost, despite nearly 2 years passing between departure and rescue, and despite enduring conditions that by almost any reasonable measure should have killed at least some of them. It remains to this day one of the most remarkable survival stories in the entire history of exploration, still taught in leadership courses and business schools around the world as a case study in how to hold a team together when everything has gone catastrophically wrong. What made the difference, according to nearly every account from the men who lived through it, was Shackleton himself. His relentless focus on morale, his willingness to take on the most dangerous tasks personally rather than delegate them, and his refusal to ever fully let his crew believe rescue was impossible are widely credited as the reasons the expedition didn't end in tragedy. Even in the expedition's darkest moments, Shackleton maintained a simple, unwavering priority. Not the original mission, not personal glory, but bringing every one of his men home alive. So what do we actually take away from a story like this? It's a profound demonstration of what human leadership and sheer stubborn will can accomplish even when every original goal has completely fallen apart. Shackleton's expedition failed at what it originally set out to do. It never crossed Antarctica, but in failing at that mission, it succeeded at something far more remarkable, keeping an entire crew alive through nearly 2 years of some of the harshest conditions imaginable. Next time something you're working toward falls apart completely, remember there was a crew of men who lost their ship, lost their original mission, and were stranded in one of the most hostile places on Earth, and every single one of them still made it home. If this story moved you the way it moved me, make sure you're subscribed because there are more incredible true survival stories just like this one still to come.